Good morning, everybody. My name is Ali Board, and this is Technique Tuesday. You are very welcome indeed. Now, this is my first live broadcast on YouTube, so I'm getting used to the technology. I'm clicking about. I wish you could see my desk because I have so much stuff in front of me to let this broadcast go very smoothly. So, thank you very much for taking the time and trouble to tune in. Now, you might be watching live. If you are watching live, then you may have come across the little chat window, which you are very welcome to take part in. Keep talking to each other. Let me know what the weather's like where you are. What I would ask is that if you have a question about what it is that I'm doing, just stick the word question at the start of it, and then I can get to the arty questions. Looks like lots and lots of people are tuning in live, so thank you so much for that. It is lovely to be back. I've had a bit of a break, and so I kind of stopped doing TT in November of last year, and this is now March 2023, so we're back with a bang. Now, Technique Tuesday was kind of born out of lockdown. It started over on Facebook, and it's kind of grown ever since. Grown so much, actually, that I've got some really lovely followers. And that brings me to my first point, that you following me absolutely means the world to me. So if you are watching this live on YouTube, please do click the subscribe button. I can't remember which side it is, but if you would click that subscribe button, that would help me hugely. And do put a comment. If you're not watching this live and you're watching it on catch up, then leave me a comment. You might even be watching this via my blog, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. In which case, leave me a comment because I would love to hear from you. So let's just take you through that little bit of tech before we get stuck into the demonstration. And I apologise if I look down and I kind of glance around. I've got bits of paper stuck everywhere this morning to remind me of all the things that I need to do. But in order to take part with this demonstration, if you fancy having a go yourself, then you need to head over to my website. Now, what is my website? This is my website, www.learningtopaint.co.uk. I'll leave that scrolling there for just a little while. Now, the website is full of all sorts of information. It's full of where you can join me for classes. If you want to join my online art group, the All Aboard Artists, you can find out more there. But it also houses the blog. Now, the blog is set to be much bigger and much better for 2023. It's not only going to house Technique Tuesday, it's going to house a new blog post every week. You can sign up for my newsletter, all those sorts of things. So shall I show you where you need to go for that? So let me just click the right button. Here it is. This is that www.learningtopaint.co.uk. Now, yours might look a little bit different than it does on my screen. You might be looking at it on a tablet or a smartphone. So you might have three little lines for the menu, or if you're looking at it on a desktop like I am, then you can see there it says blog. So let's click on that, and it should take us over to the blog. And you can go back through, you can scroll back through all of the blog posts there, but the one that's important for today is this one right here, which says Technique Tuesday returns. And if you click on or tap on read more, you can read more about the broadcast. And there you go, that's the first bit of information that we have for you today. Each month, because Technique Tuesday is now going to come to you once a month, it will be a much bigger demonstration. It will be at the very least an hour long. Each month I will theme it, because I'm theming my other classes. And they're all kind of based very loosely around a very general theme. This is the theme for March. We have an English spring. Not that it feels very spring-like where I am on the south coast of England today, because it's almost snowing. Sleet and horrible. But here for today, you can see and you can find as much information as you need to follow along at home. Now, I would recommend that you watch the demo first, because if you know my painting, you know that I paint very fast indeed. And so it's probably best to just watch me and then go back over to the resources. But here are a couple of photos. We're looking at snowdrops today, and I've put some download links there so you can download them and print them out yourself. And then here's all the equipment that I'm using. And when I say all the equipment, I really do mean all the equipment, down to every last little thing. Now, you might notice that those are links there. Now, those are what are called affiliate links. And what those are, it means that if you click on one of those links and it takes you over to somewhere where you might purchase one of the products, I do get a little bit of a kickback. It's only a tiny, tiny little thing that I get, but it helps to keep these broadcasts free for all. So you're doing me a huge favour if you do that. Now, just to remind you, that is on the website. It's under that little menu thing that says blog. So you can find everything right there. I hope that makes sense. There's that learningtopaint.co.uk. If you wanted to go straight to the blog after learningtopaint.co.uk, you could just put a / and blog, and it will take you straight there. Hopefully that's all the resources that you'll need. And just in case you are watching it live and you want to watch this back, that is where you will find the catch-up information. So everything there for you to do that. Now, I was talking about those affiliate links and why it helps to keep these broadcasts free. It also helps if you subscribe or you sign up to my newsletter or you follow me on social media. So as you can see, I spent Christmas designing new graphics. So let's get rid of that and let's pop this one up. So no matter where you search for me, if you put the little @ symbol, Ali Board Artist into Google, you will find my Facebook page, my Instagram, my YouTube channel, all of the things where you could possibly hope to find me. So sign up to anything that you would like to and share those things too, because to be honest, that's as valuable to me as anything else. Now, I'm looking at my little prompt cards because I've got to remember everything today, but I think I've done everything. And it's lovely to see so many of you commenting and also chatting to each other as well, which is just, awesome. It's all about bringing us together as a community, isn't it? So let's get rid of that and let's take you to the reference material that I am going to be using today. And here is that photograph. Now, I went for 3 snowdrops simply because I wanted to be able to get through this within the time that we have together. And the other photograph that I have also placed in the resources was just going to take me that little bit longer. But it's up to you which you choose. And you might notice from the equipment list that there's some unusual bits of equipment there. Now, that doesn't mean you have to replicate them. That doesn't mean that you have to follow along exactly. I would love to see how you interpret that. And if you do come up with your version of it, would you be kind enough, if you post it onto social media, to just put the @Ali Board Artist somewhere in your post, just to attribute it, and that also helps to get the word out. I'm asking for a lot of favours. I realised that this morning, but hopefully my demo will make up for any of those favours that I am asking you. Now, we have new technology here in the studio. We have good old overhead camera, which we'll go to in a second, but we also have close-up camera too. I have spent my time away from Technique Tuesday, hopefully wisely, in setting things up so you can see it better. Let's go to that overhead camera, shall we? And you can see everything that I have got for you. There we go. Now, big piece of kitchen roll at the moment, but let's just peel this back and you'll be able to see what I have prepared for you. And here are those snowdrops. Now, I'm going to take you through the equipment that we're using, and I'm going to take you through how I got the painting to this point in time. So bear with me, and then I promise I will start painting soon. So let's get to the bottom of this. I printed out, you can see I've got the 2 photographs here. I'm not going to be using this one today. I'm going to pop that over on my desk over to one side. This was the one that I used. And I did a transfer technique just to make it faster, just to kind of bypass necessarily all of the drawing process. So I taped it down to my black watercolour paper. Now, whose black watercolour paper is this? Unsurprisingly, it is my black watercolour paper that I've been using today. This is made in association with the SAA. If you follow the SAA, you may know that I am very proud, very honoured to be one of their professional partners. And one of the things that we get to do is to produce and design our own materials. So this is a 320 gram watercolor paper. It doesn't have a cotton content, but you don't necessarily want your black watercolor paper to have a cotton content. Interestingly enough, that's another chat for another day, but take it as read that this watercolor paper, it's nice and heavy. It's got a really lovely texture on it, very like you would expect on watercolor paper. So if I get that into the light, you should be able to see it's got a rather nice grain on it. It's a little bit smoother than it is rougher, but for me, that watercolour paper has always worked really well. So what I did was I taped my black and white version down with a little bit of framer's tape, you can see there. And then underneath that, I popped some trace down. So this is like good old-fashioned carbon paper, but it's not waxy like carbon paper. As you can see, I've done all sorts of things on this. Spider's web and some oak leaves and some Celtic knotwork. And this is white, so it comes in all sorts of colours, and it was the white that I used for this transfer. When I had done that transfer, I don't like the quality of the line when I've done the transfer with a trace down. It's usually a bit too thick. So what I did was I took my putty eraser and I went over it and I almost erased all of it. I tend to use a little dragging motion over the top. I lightened it enough that I could just about see it, but not taking it away so much that I didn't have something that I could follow. Then what I did, stick with me folks, I promise I'll get there in a minute. Then what I did was I went back over my drawing with a watercolour pencil. Now this is a Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer watercolour pencil, and whilst it looks white in the camera, I can absolutely categorically say to you, as you can probably see here, that it is cold grey. This is cold grey number 1. And the reason that I use a cold grey pencil instead of a white one is that it's not quite so harsh. It's not quite so bright. I know that we're doing white flowers, so it wouldn't really matter if I had a white outline. But if you were doing another subject matter, the cold grey is quite a useful pencil. And don't forget, we've got green caps to our snowdrops too, so we don't necessarily want them to have a stark white outline. So that's what I did. I also use a watercolour pencil so that if for some reason I want my line to disappear, when my wet brush touches it, then it dissipates or it fuzzes out, and I've got more chance of it kind of getting a nice lost edge, and then that way we kind of haven't got everything outlined and it turns into paint by numbers. I would be really interested in the chat, if you are watching this live, if any of you do a similar process, or if any of you have come unstuck with this method of getting things down onto black watercolour paper. So because we're trying to build a community here on my YouTube channel, pop it into the chat, swap advice, tell each other what you use, and absolutely disagree with me. If you think that you've got a better system than the one that I'm using, then tell people about it. Share everything, because that is going to be the way that we all help each other out and we all learn. It'd be nice to hear what you have to say about that. So I drew it all out. I used, I kind of played around with the composition a little bit. You will notice from the photograph, let's have a look at that photograph again. Where's it gone? Reference, there we go. You will notice that the center snowdrop is sort of the same height as this one, which I didn't like an awful lot. So in my drawing, this is a very, very subtle thing. I dropped this leaf down a little bit. I didn't like the fact that these two lined up. I sort of wanted it looking like this was kind of the most open, and then the kind of the next open, and then this one was dropping away. That kind of nice, slightly diagonal kind of falling away as we go down. So that is why I've kind of altered it a little bit. I've allowed the stems of my snowdrops to kind of fall away. I'm not going to bother doing the ends of them. I don't want them to look like they're chopped off. We'll use some lost edges there to describe the ends of those. So that was my drawing. And then something a little bit unusual that I did. I'm going to swing my other camera in. You'll just see it appearing down here. Let's go into close-up. I might have to do just a tiny bit of adjustment with this. You're going to have to just bear with me a second. There we go. Now from close-up camera, you might notice that there's something else going on here, that there looks like there's a texture on the paper. Well, you would be absolutely right. And I'm going to show you it just briefly here so that you can see actually how much texture I've got going on. It's quite thick, it's quite heavy. Let me explain why I have done that. We'll go back to overhead. Now, the reason that I've done that is if you know my work well, you will know that I like there to be texture, I like there to be a bit of drama, I like to have all sorts of things going on in my paintings, and it would have been really tempting to stick with the black watercolour paper and paint white over on the top. It would have still been equally dramatic, but you know me, I like to mix it up a little bit, so I used this stuff. Now this is watercolour ground. Now you might have heard of this. This is a way of being able to prime a non-painting surface so that you can paint with watercolours over the top. So for example, it might be that you want to paint on canvas with watercolour. It might be that you want to paint on a piece of MDF or just something where it's not going to take watercolour very well. So watercolour ground is like a primer. And I use watercolour ground a lot in my work, but you probably will have seen me use white before. Now I had some decisions to make on this. Obviously my piece of paper is black, so it's going to be quite dramatic. But you might be sitting there thinking to yourself, why on earth, Ali, are you using black watercolour ground when your the petals of your snowdrops are going to be white anyway? I could have done it like that, couldn't I? I could have very easily taken my white watercolour ground, and I'll show you how I applied it in just a second. And I could have put it on. It would have done half the work for me, wouldn't it? However, the problem with using the white watercolour ground is that if I put it on and I got it in the wrong place, or I decided that I wanted to move something, I'm then a little bit stuck with that mark that I have made. And I've never done this before. I haven't done this particular technique in this way. So it's a big steep learning curve for us all. I decided to do it in black. Mostly because I don't know if you, well, you probably can see at home, the black watercolour ground and the black paper almost match identically in tone, which was an absolute jackpot. I didn't know that that was going to happen. And what that means is I can lose some of my edges. I don't necessarily have to use all of the texture, and it's all going to come together. Well, fingers crossed, it's all going to come together rather lovely. But let's see how we get on. So the way that I applied this was I like to use a palette knife. Now I prefer a metal palette knife, but that's not to say that's the only way of applying this. You might use a plastic palette knife or a cut up credit card or anything to get it on. And the way that I do it, let's just take the lid off, is that I load the lid up. It acts as a bit of a palette, and I stick some into the lid like that. And I want to use the back of my palette knife or the edge of my palette knife. I don't want to use the front because it's too difficult to manipulate. So what I do is I load up the back of my palette knife, and then I have quite a lot of fun making marks all over the place for the petals. Now I've done it on the petals, I've done it on the tops of the snowdrops, and I've done it on the leaves too. So I've edged my palette knife up the side to be able to create some long lines, and I've used the back of the palette knife to be able to create some interesting marks. So let's go back to close-up camera, and then hopefully it will make a little bit more sense. You can see that I've got some interesting ridges and shapes. It does take a long time to dry. I did prepare this at the weekend to give it the absolute maximum amount of time so that I could really play about with these ridges. It's quite thick. You can dry it in the one session. You can pop it on and then dry it with a heat gun or a hairdryer, but it never dries as well as just leaving it alone and kind of letting it do its thing overnight. So here we are. Here we have arrived at this point in time. Now, what am I going to use to paint this in? I'm really not going to worry too much about my background. I like the black. It was one of the reasons that I chose this photograph, because I just like the drama of it, if I'm honest. Excuse me. So I'm not really going to bother with a background. I think the black paper speaks for itself. What am I going to use to paint this in? Well, the thing that I'm going to use to paint it in is I'm going to use some gouache paint. Now, I have an absolute love of gouache. It was the thing that it was the medium that I originally taught myself to paint with. I think it's incredibly versatile. As a mixed media painter, it just does lots and different things. So what am I using? I'm using a set of stacking saucers. Let me just grab them. Oops. From over here. Here we go. I use these, which are called stacking saucers or tinting saucers, because white gouache does tend to make everything in your palette very chalky. So I like to keep them separate. We've got a couple of whites that we might consider. We've got zinc white on the left-hand side. I'm so obsessive with my organisation as well. Of course, I have to label everything to make sure that I get the right one. This is permanent white. This is the Winsor & Newton permanent white. I use 2 or 3 different brands, but I'm going to be using this one today. I'm also going to be using some green. I'm actually going to use the lid of my tinting saucer for my greens. And then just over here, almost out of shot, but not quite, I have a cold grey again, which is a colour that I think, well, I'm not sure whether I'm going to be using that, but you never know, it might be useful. And I also have some velvet black. Now, I love velvet black because velvet black is very similar to the colour of my paper. So in the same way that if you're working on white watercolour paper, you might use white gouache to do a little bit of editing. I'm going to be using black watercolour paper and black gouache to kind of take anything out, put anything back in that I so desire. So we're almost there at the end of the rundown of equipment. I'm going to have my safety net, my security blanket of a bit of kitchen roll in one hand. I have a spray bottle. I'm not sure if I'm going to need that. That again is a bit of a security. I've got a lovely pot of water. Keep your eye on the pot of water because this will go into something very soupy by the time I have finished. And I have a selection of brushes here. Now, the brushes that I'm going to use are twofold today. I have got the SAA's Imitation Sable brushes. These I love for being able to control the paint. They are a nylon, so you haven't got any ecological issues there at all. And I'm also using the Da Vinci Casaneo brushes too. Because these are like mop brushes, so I'll be able to do some very loose impressionistic work with those, but these are also synthetic. So again, I'm sticking to, I think, almost 100% vegan products that I'm using today. So if that is something that you like to think about in the sustainability of how you paint, then I can promise you that all of the products that we are thinking about today certainly are on that side. So I'm going to start with my size 0 mop brush. And we're going to start by adding a little bit of white gouache. What I've got to do on my screen is pull up the photograph so that I can see what I'm doing, which would be good. Now, there's lots of chat going on, which I'm loving. If you are watching this live, I can see that lots of people are sharing their techniques, which is awesome. If you have any questions, just pop them into that live chat. Just stick the word question at the beginning and then I'll be able to pick it out of all the lovely chat that's going on. Lots of people saying, yay, I found the chat button. Awesome, thank you very much. Right, let's mix up a nice consistency of our gouache here. Now this is a bit Goldilocks. Like, we want it to be not too thin and not too thick, just right. I usually say sort of single cream, double cream, thin yogurt, maybe pouring yogurt, that kind of consistency. It is a bit scary when you're working on black paper to suddenly use something that is ever so white over here, but just go for it. What could possibly go wrong? And then let's start getting some of this delicious gouache down onto our surface, and you can see straight away how it's interacting with that texture. And then I can use some water to thin it out so that we've got some found edges and some lost edges too. And this lovely mop brush taking care of it really, really quickly, which I love. Now, every time your brush goes back into the water, you've got to, look at that, spraying it all over the place already. You've got to add a bit more gouache, because otherwise this will end up getting thinner and thinner and thinner and it won't cover properly. So let's go for this one next, using the tip of my brush to get that delicious petal shape in. Bringing it up, you'll notice I use my little finger there as a way of balancing on the paper, taking the moisture off of my brush, and then I can use the kitchen roll to lift out anything that I want, or I can use a blending out technique to get that a little softer too. So we're going to repeat that process. We're going to add a bit of white. We're doing something called blocking in, which effectively means that we're going to pop colour on everything. We're not going to overthink it. We're going to try very hard to not overthink it. And then we'll go and we'll see what we've got. And we can shape it, sculpt it, mould it to do whatever it is that we want it to do. Now, the joyful thing about gouache is that I could let this dry. I could go on holiday for a few weeks. I could come back and I'd still be able to edit this. It would still be something that I could go back in, I could re-wet, I could blend out, all of those kind of things. And that's one of the major reasons that I love gouache. So we're almost done with this one. That's working well. It's a bit scrappy at the minute, but we're not going to worry about that because we've got other stuff to do to it yet. It's kind of taking shape. That's all that we need for the time being. Right, this one next. So again, it goes back into the gouache. I'm sorry that you've got a bit of shine over there in the camera. I've got a great big light to my right hand side so that I'm not painting in the dark, because it is ridiculously dark in Dorset here today. Let's go back. Let's do this petal. This one's got loads of texture on it, so I'm very excited about that one. And actually, rather than washing my brush out, let's go straight to this petal as well. Turning my hand upside down so that I can get the tip of it into that petal shape, bringing it, when I've got it in the right way, bringing it round. And you can see that where this is starting to dry now, that texture showing up. I will give you a bit of a sneaky peek in the close-up camera when I've got a bit more colour down. Now, it's not neat and tidy at all at the moment. It doesn't need to be neat and tidy. I'm doing this impressionistically, so I can go back and I can tidy these things later. Doesn't all have to be done in the one hit. Still going to look like snowdrops. Right, into the gouache, into the puddle. Just need it to have slightly less on it. Let's do this petal. So I'm looking at my reference material all the time, double checking that I'm getting the shapes in the right place, making sure that I'm starting to think about where my shadows are, my sort of tonal values, my lost and found elements, if you like working in that way. So it's a bit darker there, a bit brighter there. What else do we need to do on that one? We kind of need to address this center section too. Now, for me, the mop brushes don't provide enough detail. That is why I like to use both the mop brushes and the imitation sable rounds, because then I get the best of both worlds. What the mop brushes will do for me is apply my colour in a nice, loose and impressionistic way. Now, I've just spotted a comment come in because I think this is worth mentioning. Lovely Anne B. Good morning, Anne. Anne has put, that's my learning for today. Never knew you could go back in much later with gouache. Well, that's brilliant. That's why we're all here, isn't it? To kind of share what we do. And if I have helped you understand your paints a bit better, then it's a jackpot, isn't it? Awesome. Glad that I was able to pass that bit of information on to you this morning, Anne. Right, let's go in. We've got a kind of wobbly old petal going on here. So Angie is saying, top tip, I have the pot of water on the same side of the paper as the hand you hold your brush in. I kept wondering why I was getting mushy splats. Yes, do you know what, Angie, that's really interesting that you say that. The number of times when I'm teaching live, when I'm teaching in person, and I notice that people set up their workspace so they're having to cross in front of themselves all the time. I don't know why it's a thing. It seems obvious, doesn't it, when you think about it? But people do it a lot. I think we're also panicked about how we're going to paint something and what mediums we're going to use, that we tend not to think about how our workspace is going to function in the best way possible for ourselves. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. I spend my life taking hold of people's water pots and putting them over to one side. And while we are talking about water pots, it might be worth mentioning that I'm sure that some of you out there will be shouting at your screens going, Ali, your water is so milky and like soup now. Why don't you have 2 pots of water? Why don't you have a pot that you wash your brush out in and a pot that you're just going to use for thinning out your colour? And then you'll have kind of one clean pot and one that is kind of got the soup in it. And I'll tell you for why, because it doesn't matter how many pots of water I have to one side, is that I just end up dipping my brush in all of them so they all get filthy. So I've got to the point now where I go, well, do you know what? I'll just have all of them filthy. I'll just have the one and then I don't have to worry about it. Okay, so there's my white kind of blocked in, drying nicely. Some of it might need a second coat, but it doesn't at the moment. So now I'm going to pull in the little lid that I've got and choose a green for my snowdrops. Now I have a couple of options here. These are both De La Rowney gouache. We have leaf green here and we have olive green too. I did pull out a process green as well. Now, this is brilliant on black paper, but it isn't the most realistic of colours, as you can see. So I'm going to save that just in case I need some extra highlights. I'm going to start off with my leaf green and my olive green, and we'll see where we get. So there's my leaf green. If you wonder why that's spinning round, it's just because it's got a domed lid, and so it doesn't want to sit nice and flat on my desk for me. So a bit of leaf green and then a bit of olive green, because we don't want everything to be bright. We want some deep colour too. Let's pop the lid on there. And actually I'm going to pick this one up and then you'll be able to see what I'm doing in terms of mixing up the consistency. Look at that. Isn't that delicious? I don't know that I'll need that processed green actually. I think that's going to work very well indeed. And while that's on my brush, let's go back into these snowdrops and add some highlights. So I've got a bit of texture here too. Oh, look at that. Look how it sucks up the brightness of that. I thought that was going to come out brighter than it is. Maybe I'm going to need an extra layer of that. But we'll worry about that in a minute. All I'm after for the time being is making some nice impressionistic marks. Do you know what I'm going to do? I said I wasn't going to need it, but this is why I have everything prepared in front of me. I'm going to add some zinc white into this. Now, why not permanent white? I'm not adding permanent white into it because I don't want it to go like a pastel colour. I want it to just have a bit more solidity. I have put green in my white, but that won't be the first time that I've ever done that. And zinc white is more like a mixing white as opposed to a bright white. So I'm going to take some of that. Fast running out of space as per usual, and I'm going to transfer it over to my leaf green, and then I'm hoping that'll give it just a tiny bit more of a punch and it might sit on the surface more. Yeah, that's better. I'm liking that more now. It's kind of giving it a bit of oomph. Pam is asked a very pertinent question. She's put, does gouache dry lighter to the same degree as watercolour, please? An excellent question, Pam. Thank you very much for that. So it's a bit of a conundrum with gouache. Follow this if you can. Pale colours, on the whole, tend to dry darker, and dark colours tend to dry paler. But all of that depends on the colour of the surface that you're painting on. So that doesn't always work. So you might notice that this white is drying a little bit darker. Now I've got this olive green here. This is the perfect timing, Pam, to answer this question. When I put it on my black paper, it's a little bit tricky to see. I'll get my head out of shot as well. It's a little bit tricky to see, but that is going to dry lighter in a little while. So it's kind of annoying, but a little bit down to experience. And you tend to find that you have colours that you get on with really well and colours that you could cheerfully do without. So I've kind of got, I've got quite a lot of gouache colours, but I tend to default back to my favourites in the same way that I would do with my watercolours, because they dry in a way that I like, or they dry in a way that I can predict, all of those kind of things. I hope that answers the question for you. So using just a few strokes, whilst I've kind of rushed on ahead really, whilst that's still on the damp side, let's blend those together. We can smudge them together with a few brush strokes. I'm not after this being perfect snowdrops, we're after essence of snowdrops. And you'll start to see, can you see now how this is drying? It's already starting to dry lighter. So that's a really good indication of how a dark colour will often dry paler in gouache land. So got that in, that's gonna go, that's all fine. And then let's go back over here. We've got our bright leaf green. Now, just in case you're wondering what these are, you can read more about it on the blog. But these are magnets, because as much as this looks like a piece of wood, this drawing board, it is actually magnetized with a bit of contact paper over the top. Now let's get this last one in. I can see a couple of questions have come in. Pam is saying that yes, it is definitely trial and error, my lovely. And of course it varies according to brand as well, which is a bit frustrating, but a good excuse to test out lots of different paints, isn't it? Now Julie is asking a question. If you don't have gouache colour, can you mix it with white gouache and watercolour? Yes, absolutely, Julie. My recommendation would be that you go for the zinc white in the gouache as opposed to the permanent white. That way you get much kind of more realistic paler shades, as opposed to everything looking like kind of baby colours, ice cream colours and the like. So yeah, we've done that very often before in workshops and classes, where we utilise a white gouache instead of necessarily having to buy lots of new colours, unless of course you're feeling like treating yourself. Ah dear. And lots of people giving each other advice and help. So we'll get some of this dark on, and then we'll give it a really good dry. We'll see what we've got. And then we'll go in and we'll do some neater things. So quite scrappy at the moment. It's certainly not as neat and tidy as it could be. Excuse me. But it's giving us a really nice kind of feel. Oh, do you know what I haven't done? I haven't done the green or my snowdrops, have I? Oh, goodness me. Let's pop that in quickly before we give everything a dry. Otherwise, it's not going to look like a snowdrop. Let's get some of that colour in on those petals. Again, just want a dot of it here and there. This is not a bit, as you're probably acutely aware, this is not a botanical version of these snowdrops by any stretch of the imagination. That's too thin a colour, that's too watery and is not going to show up. We can tighten everything up, neaten everything else up later on. Where else do I need this? I need a few flashes in there. I'm sort of dotting my way around my subject now. Didn't put these stems in either. I'm getting too carried away, as often happens when I demonstrate live online. Let's get these in. Oh, that one I did. What made that one special? Okay, so it looks a little bit brighter in the camera than it actually is in real life, because I like you to be able to see it. But let's give it a blast with the heat gun, and just talk amongst yourselves for 2 minutes while I do it. If I see any questions pop up, I will endeavour to answer them. So watch these colours as well to see how they change when they dry. Look at that one. So that's the olive green when it's wet. Now just watch it as I dry it. So that's a quite a good example, isn't it, of how those darker colours dry paler. And I'm going to give it a quick dry on the back as well. And I've got this one done. Got a bit of a puddle of white there that's never going to dry in a million years, considering this is a live broadcast. So let's mop some of that up with a corner of kitchen roll, and then we're not having to sit and watch paint dry. Let's dry it on the back too. Okay, and just while that piece of paper is warm, let's do the paper dance. Let's waggle it around so that it goes back flat again. Sometimes paper just needs persuading a little bit, and then we'll clamp it back down to the board so that it sits nice and flat. And then we're good to go again. So this is the way that I tend to paint. I tend to block everything in. For no other reason than I don't have a lot of patience with my painting. I like things to happen really quite instantly. But the reason that I do it in this way is so that I can see what I've got. If I put colour on everything, then I can go back in and I can manipulate it, I can edit it, I can do other things to it. Otherwise, if I just work on, say I decided to work on one snowdrop and I kind of brought that up so that it was really kind of detailed and finished. Me personally, what would happen is that I would run out of steam for the others. or I might run out of time, and so one would be finished and two would be kind of underpainted, and then it would feel like it hadn't reached its conclusion. Or if for some reason it runs out of steam and I have to work on it another day, or I'm not really sure where I'm going with it, then at least everything is even and I haven't still got work to do. So that's the reason for doing things in this way, which might not work for you, but it is certainly the way that things work for me. So now I'm going over to my imitation sable brushes. I'm going to use a size 4 for this, but brush sizes are only relative to the range that they're in, so you might find that a different size works better for your detail. Now this is proper soup now, isn't it? Look at the state of that. But it'll be all right. For the purposes of today's demonstration, I would probably go and change my water, but I don't want to leave you whilst I waltz across to the other side of the studio, so we'll just crack on. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another layer of colour to my petals to tidy up some of the elements. Maybe I want some of the bits to be a bit neater. Maybe they need another coat. Maybe they need tidying up. What I do have to be careful when I'm layering up gouache is if I do too much blending, or if I do add too many layers, I am in grave danger of disturbing what is underneath. So you have to be a little bit careful. Now, I wasn't sure if I was going to need my grey, but I think I do. So this is De La Rowney's Cold Grey. It's one of my favourite colours in gouache. I could mix it, of course I could mix it, but I'm being lazy today. And in gouache you have a different kind of set of colour mixing considerations than you might do in watercolour. It is perfectly permissible to use white, perfectly permissible to use grey. And if you've ever been to any of my watercolour sessions, then you'll know that I actively encourage you to use white, grey and black in watercolours as well. But just in gouache, it is deemed to be a tad more acceptable. I'm glad from the comments that you like the way that this is coming together. Thank you very much for that. Now, did I just see, I'm going to try and multitask and do this detailed bit of my snowdrops at the same time. Sue asked a question. I like the idea of magnetic board instead of using tape. Do you have a link for it? Thank you very much, Sue, for reminding me. If you, let's just make that thing pop up. If you go over to my website, learningtopaint.co.uk, and you select blog from the menu, you will see that there is a Technique Tuesday blog post that I put up earlier today, and all of the equipment that I'm using today, every single last little bit of it, even down to some of the things that I have used in my preparation, like the coloured biros that I use, that kind of stuff, you will see links to all of them. The drawing board, the magnetic sheet, the contact paper, all of that is there on the blog, so I hope it helps. And like I was explaining at the start of the broadcast, I do use something called affiliate links. So if you do end up purchasing anything, what that does is just help me out a little bit in order to keep these broadcasts free. Oh, I got a tickle in my throat. Thank you very much, Sue, for asking that question. Now, because of the nature of a live broadcast, I'm probably not going to finish this in quite the way that I would like. I would probably like to spend more time than I am able on these snowdrop petals, but you'll certainly get an idea of how it's going to go together. Oh, look at that, dolloping it everywhere. So lots of ways that I could tidy this up. I could use pens, I could use paint markers, I could use watercolour pencils, all of those considerations. But I'm going to stick to just using gouache today so that you can see this one medium in action. So let's bring that petal, oh, don't cough and paint at the same time, Ali, down to the bottom. And you probably notice that my blending action has a little circular motion going on. I tend to find that if I try to blend my colours together and I make a repetitive stroke like that, it will look very fake. It will look a little bit forced. So what I try to do is I use a circular motion with my brush to blend the colours together. And then I end up with something that I think looks a bit more realistic myself. You'll see me use that as I make my way around these snowdrops. So let's add that bottom section in. Now it's still all looking a bit on the scrappy side, but that's all right. I'll take you to close-up cam in a minute. Which is something very peculiar. Oh, I know what it is. Right, we'll go back. I want to also show you how you can edit in black. So stick with me and we'll go back over and we'll do some more work to these. So we'll go back over. As you can imagine, I'm rushing it a tad. But what I would love to see is if at any point in the future you end up having a go in a similar way, then don't forget to tag me in it. And the way that you tag me in it is to put at Ali Board Artist. I'll remind you at the end of the broadcast into the post. And then not only will I see it and I'll get to see your artwork, but it helps me out enormously as well, so that people can find my tuition and they can find Technique Tuesday, and then hopefully the next time that we all come together, then they will join us too, which is kind of the point of TT, isn't it? It's to bring this kind of amazing artistic community together. What am I reaching for? Oh, that'll be all right. We'll go back in with a bit of that. I've got, look at that horrible water blob on my brush. I hate those. They run down into the paint and they mess up with the consistency of your colour. So you want to keep an eye on those, on the ferrule, on the metal part of your brush. You want to really keep a watching brief on them to make sure that they don't mess up your painting. So let's get that little circular blending thing in. And oh, actually I quite like this bit. I don't mind this bit at all. Look, another blob, look at that. I want to get rid of that white line, that kind of cold grey watercolour pencil down there. I want to get rid of that. So that needs a few tweaks, but I'll come back to that in a second. Let's get some more work done on here. I'm gonna have to put my hand down, I have no choice. This needs tidying up considerably, this leaf. It doesn't make sense at all. And we'll swish a bit more colour up there. Let's go back into that leaf green. This is another thing that I quite like doing. I don't like over mixing on my palette. I'm not a fan. It's a procrastination tool in my eyes. If I start smashing colour around a bit too much on here, I end up doing that and not actually painting. So what I actually prefer to do is to pick up two colours on my brush so that they mix on the paper instead, which requires a little bit of bravery, it has to be said, but it's certainly, in my eyes, a much more interesting way of getting paint to manifest itself on the paper. Let's run some of that colour. That's what I don't like about that one, actually. I want some of my colour to kind of, that's better. Why didn't I do that before? Blend into the surroundings. Oh, it's like pick and mix, isn't it? Making our way around the colour. Now, what's going on over here? We certainly need a tidier, brighter swipe of white there. I don't dislike how loose that one is. But I do want it to disappear behind this one. So if I make it a darker tone under there, then hopefully that one will look like it's behind this one. I'm determined to throw paint all over this, aren't I? Let's go back to this one and bring this edge out, tidy this up. This is much better. And then we want some brighter white. Ooh, look at that for a bit of meaty texture. Over there. Where's this going? This needs to join up a bit more. So we've got a very bright white highlight there, which is cool. I think I'm going to start leaving the splatters because I think actually I don't dislike them. I'm mopping them up to kind of make it all neat and tidy, but I think actually I should just leave them behind. I think it kind of adds to all of it. That's better. Why didn't I do that before? Right, let's tidy up this petal down here at the bottom and make sure that it is sharp where we want it to be sharp and soft where we want it to be soft. So brush back into that water, take off the majority, and there we go. We're using that little circular motion to get it blended in. And sometimes your brush gets so full of colour that you need to wash it out and start again. That's cool, that'll do. And then this one, while I've got the white in my hand, let's tidy this one up. There are a couple of really dramatic things I want to do to this towards the end, but I need to sort of make it tidier before I can mess around with it. So we'll get that, and like that shadow is very serendipitous. I didn't necessarily intend for that shadow to work like that, but there we go, it's working better than I thought it was going to. Always good. I'd like to be able to tell you that every brush mark that I make is always very well considered, but to be honest, when you're doing a live broadcast like this, you are working so intuitively because you've got a million other things to remember, and sometimes that works in your favour and sometimes it really doesn't. And sometimes I look back at my demonstrations and I think, oh, really? So if you're having a bad day with your paintings, just think you could be doing it live for an audience, couldn't you? Right, let's get that in. Lots of people saying that it's starting to come together now, which is cool. Oh, excuse me, I'm going to have a slight sip of juice because I got a bit of cough. Okay, so we're kind of on the home straight now. We've got a few things to do to this, a couple of little techniques that I have up my sleeve for you, and then we will just remind ourselves of where we can find those resources before we part company today. That's scrappy. I can't let that go. I always think that, oh, just let it go, Ali, just let it go, it'll be fine. But actually, sometimes you've really got to go back in and tidy things up. Because if they look too scrappy, your eye will just go straight to them all the time. That's better. And yes, the texture's really showing up now. Who is saying that? Julie, lovely Julie was saying that. Let's go to the close-up camera so you can sort of see, because I think the close-up camera shows the texture a little better. So quite interesting. Very dramatic, I think you would say. So what can we do to finish this? Here's a handy hint. This velvet black, do you remember the velvet black? And I said you'd be able to use this to make some edits. Oh, I love this colour. I think it's delicious. And so what you can do is you can use it to lose some edges. So if there were some bits, for example, down here that you thought, oh, I am not sure about how I've finished that, the velvet black can be worked back into those shapes to lose them. When it's wet, it will look quite strong, but if I use a touch of a blending technique to get it into those greens, hopefully it will look a little bit more realistic. Let's just pull some of it back and let's dry it so we see what we've got. Yeah, look at that. Interesting, very interesting. Don't worry, I am going to add a spatter to this at the end, well, because it's my painting and I end a spatter with everything. So we'll get that in, try and get rid of some of these white lines. Not going to be able to get rid of all of them, but it'll be fine. Twill be fine. And then there are just some places on my snowdrops where either I want to tidy something up. So here, for example, I want to tidy that up so I can take my velvet black around the edge. And if I use a nice blending out technique to soften that into the surroundings, that will dry nice and sharp in a minute. I can do the same here. I want to get rid of some of those little elements. I want to get rid of whatever that is. I don't know what that is either. What did I do there? Don't know. Let's get rid of it. Let's use alternative black Tipex to get rid of that. That looks better already. Let's blend those elements out. So you can, again, you can kind of go back round. You can sharpen stuff up. Anything that you think, I don't like the look of that, then you can work the black gouache in, which makes black watercolour paper extremely editable. So for those of you that lack confidence with doing things kind of straight away and immediately on white watercolour paper, black watercolour paper might be an interesting consideration. Just do your homework with your black watercolour paper before you purchase any for the texture that you get on it. So if you have any experience of black watercolour paper, don't have to buy mine. There's lots of them out there on the market. Then please do share the whatever you bought in the chat. So that's working. That's much better. This is why I love this black. Oh, Anne is saying it's spring on the paper. Thank you, my lovely. That's very kind. So let's go back here and let's sharpen that edge up because that needs it. And let's sharpen this edge up. This is my favourite bit, really. Going back in and doing the edit. But I couldn't do the edit if I didn't have colour on everything, you see. CCC. Right. There is lots of things that I would do on this ordinarily, but we are pushed for time. Now, I'm going to do a couple of spatters, possibly not what you would expect. The first spatter I'm going to do is in black, because what I want to do, when I've got rid of the water on my ferrule, is to break up some of that white so that we're adding to the texture of it. It's also really good if you've got a slightly dodgy area and you think, oh, it's going to be too much work to kind of reclaim the white on that, then spatter back in with the black. So there we go. We kind of get that nice look and feel to it again. And then that's a disgusting colour now, isn't it? Then we're going to go over into the green. And this is kind of both of them mixed up together now, but that'll be all right. Let's get rid of the water on the ferrule. And let's tap a little bit of green in. We'll concentrate the green more where the grasses are, I think, to give those some movement. That's better. Why does everything look better with a spatter on it? Because it does, is the answer, and it doesn't really matter. And then just off of shot, I've got my white gouache. Again, taking the water off of the ferrule. And just a touch of this. I don't want too much of it because I don't want it to look like it's snowing. I know they're snowdrops, but I don't want it to have too much going on. So let's take you to close-up camera. Where's the close-up camera gone? There it is. And then you can see some of the details. So you can see where the black spatter has kind of broken up those shapes. And I really like it. It's sort of in keeping with the drama of everything. And you can see the texture where that's coming through as well, and where it's kind of made my paint hit and miss on the surface. So there you have my snowdrops on the theme of an English spring on the paper. Right. Oh, let's get rid of this nonsense. Let's look at that. You see, this is the tech I have to have. Let's swing that out of shot and away. So don't disappear on me yet, because I want to remind you where you can find those resources. As you've seen, that there's been some unusual materials. So let's take you back over to the website and I will show you exactly where you can find that stuff. So if you end up on the home page of my website, it looks a little bit like this. And like I said before, the layout of the website might look a little bit different because you might be viewing it on a tablet or a smartphone. And then if you look, there's all sorts of things. You can read about me, you can have a look at the gallery of my work, you can go over to the learning to paint part, you can find out about my workshops and the All Aboard Artists and the work that I do where I'm teaching at Arts University Bournemouth. But there we have it, there is the blog post. And there you've got Technique Tuesday returns. It very clearly says read more, so you can click on that. You can read more about what I've been up to, and there's a few links on there. And if you keep scrolling, you'll find the photographs. There's links there to be able to download them. There's the equipment with all of those links and where you can find it. And the broadcast after I have gone live can be caught up with there. There you can see there's a bit of an empty space where it says the broadcast in full. Now the other thing that you will notice there is that it says next month. So I am back on April the 4th with Technique Tuesday. Don't worry, I will remind you. If you want to sign up for my newsletter on the website, then you'll actually get an email delivered with the link of where to find it. All of that kind of stuff will keep your eye on social media. So just as a last thing to remind you, if you want to share your work, or if you want to help me out and share this broadcast, that's the thing that you need to do, at Ali Board Artist. And if you put that into Google, you will find me all over the place. You cannot miss me. But thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in today. Thank you for your chat as well. That's been really helpful. It's been brilliant to have all of you with me today. Such a great community, isn't it, when we share bits of information and we get to understand across the world, because we've been in America and Australia and all over the place today. So thank you for that. It's been awesome. Thank you for being patient as well while I get used to the new tech. It seems to have been okay today. You take lots and lots of care, won't you? I will see you back here on YouTube on April the 4th for another Technique Tuesday. But keep an eye on the blog, because there's an extra little broadcast coming up. And if you didn't stay to the end of this, then you won't know about it. So every other week, there's a little secret broadcast that goes out where I share some of my tips and techniques. You've all been marvellous this morning. Thank you ever so much. Take care of yourselves, and we will catch up very soon. Bye, everybody.